Chapter 1: The Invitation. The Grand Assembly Hall was an imposing structure, built from blackened stone and lit by the cold glow of distant stars. Alien species from across the galaxy filled the massive room, each one speaking in hushed tones, their eyes fixed on the lone human standing at the center of the grand table. Captain Aaron Cole, humanity's representative, felt the weight of every stare, the gravity of their contempt pressing down on him like a physical force. On the other side of the hall, Overseer Talvok rose from his seat, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial light. The room fell silent. Humanity, Talvok's voice echoed, harsh and cold, a species so fragile it can barely survive its own planet. Yet here you stand, demanding a seat among us. Why should we allow such a weak race to join the Galactic Alliance? Cole didn't flinch. He had heard the insults before, but they still stung. He had been preparing for this moment his entire life, knowing that the survival of humanity depended on convincing the galaxy's most powerful civilizations that Earth was worth more than a mere footnote in the galactic history. "We're not fragile," Cole replied, his voice steady, betraying none of the doubt that churned in his stomach. "We've survived our own mistakes, overcome catastrophe after catastrophe, and we're stronger for it." Talvok's mandibles clicked in a mocking gesture, his sharp gaze never leaving Cole. "Survival? You call that survival? You crawl through your existence, barely scraping by, relying on luck rather than strategy. How long will it be before your species destroys itself once more?" Cole's fingers tightened around the edges of the podium, but he kept his composure. He wasn't here to argue. He was here to make them see. Humans weren't just survivors. They were adapters. He had to make them understand that. Before he could speak again, the council leader, a hulking figure draped in regal robes, intervened. "Enough, Talvok," the leader rumbled, his voice vibrating through the hall. "We did not call this summit for personal attacks. Captain Cole, explain why we should consider humanity for the Alliance. What can your species offer that the rest of us cannot do without?" Cole took a deep breath. He had expected this skepticism, hostility, disdain. But this was his chance, his one shot to prove Earth's worth. He stepped forward, lifting his chin. "We offer something none of you have. Humanity is the most unpredictable species in the galaxy. You can't foresee what we'll do next. We don't follow the rules. And that's why we're dangerous." A ripple of murmurs swept through the room. Some exchanged uncertain glances, others showed amusement, but none spoke. The leader's eyes narrowed, studying Cole with an intensity that could only be described as curiosity. "You are saying your species is dangerous?" the leader asked, his tone skeptical. "That you're a threat?" Cole nodded. "Not a threat, a force of nature. If you want stability in the galaxy, you need to consider that." He turned, gesturing to the vast hologram of Earth hovering above them. "We've been on the edge of extinction more times than you can count. Yet we always find a way out. We adapt. And you? None of you have the adaptability that we do." The council members exchanged looks, their skepticism replaced with intrigue. This wasn't the typical pitch they heard from would-be allies. Cole had to seize the moment. "Humanity is a species that thrives under pressure," he continued, pacing slowly across the platform. "We've mastered the art of turning adversity into an advantage. We're not just survivors, we're fighters. And we do it all with a core that no other species possesses. We fight for each other." A sudden, sharp interruption came from the far end of the room. One of the delegates, a reptilian diplomat, hissed, "And what of your reckless wars? Your constant infighting? You are a fractured species, not united in any sense. How do you justify that?" Cole paused, letting the question hang in the air. The reptilian's words stung, but they were true in part. Humanity was divided. It always had been. But that division, those differences had made them stronger, not weaker. "Perhaps," Cole said, his voice steady, "we're divided in the ways we think. But when we face a common enemy, when we fight for something we believe in, we stand together. Every time. And we win. That's the power you should fear." For a moment, the room was silent. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums, heavy and pregnant with the weight of a decision yet to be made. The alien delegates whispered amongst themselves, too quietly for Cole to hear. At last, the leader spoke. "We will deliberate. You may return to your quarters, Captain." Cole nodded, his heart pounding. This was far from over, and he knew it. Talvok's eyes burned with disdain, and the cold stare of the council leader showed no clear indication of what was to come. They might be pretending to listen, but the truth was humanity was a wild card, something the galaxy had never faced before. As Cole walked out of the assembly hall, he knew one thing for certain. The real battle hadn't even started yet. Chapter 2: Shadows of the Past. The silence in the command center was deafening, punctuated only by the low hum of machinery and the soft beeps of monitors tracking the Earth's orbital defense grid. Captain Aaron Cole stood in front of a large holographic display, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the growing red dots that indicated the alien fleet's movements. "We don't have much time," he muttered, eyes flicking from one display to the next. His mind raced, piecing together the strategy. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and barely prepared for what was to come. But that had never stopped humanity before. "Captain," Dr. Elena Voss's voice broke through his thoughts, sharp and precise. He turned to face her. "We need to talk." Voss stood in the doorway, her long dark hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders, her eyes sharp behind the glasses she always wore. She wasn't just any scientist. She was the architect of humanity's last hope. Behind her, Lieutenant Kira Hayes, one of Cole's most trusted officers, followed, her face etched with concern. "We don't have time for another of your theories, Elena," Cole said, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "The fleet's on its way. We have to prepare for the worst." "I know," Voss said, stepping into the room and locking eyes with him. "But this isn't just about fighting back. It's about surviving. And if you don't listen to me, we won't just lose Earth. We'll lose everything." Cole's jaw tightened. He'd seen Voss in action before. When she was confident in her work, she could move mountains. But now, she was beyond just confident. She was desperate. "What are you suggesting?" he asked, his voice low, betraying a flicker of concern. Voss held up a small, metallic device, no larger than her palm. It hummed with barely contained energy. "This," she said, her voice steady now, "is our trump card." Cole frowned, stepping forward to examine the device. "A weapon? A new kind of bomb?" "No," she replied, shaking her head. "It's not a weapon in the traditional sense. It's a technology that harnesses the adaptability of humans, the one thing the alien coalition doesn't understand. We've been testing it for months, and it works. It adapts to any situation, any threat." Cole's brow furrowed. "Adaptability? I don't see how that helps us against an entire fleet." Voss' gaze hardened. "That's because you don't understand what humans are capable of. We aren't like them. We don't follow orders. We don't follow plans. We improvise. We adapt. And this device will allow us to integrate that instinct into any system, any defense, anything we need to protect Earth." Hayes stepped forward, her voice calm but tinged with skepticism. "And you're sure this will work? It sounds too unpredictable." "Exactly," Voss said, a gleam of excitement lighting her eyes. "That's why it will work. We don't follow predictable patterns like they do. If we use this, we can outthink them, outmaneuver them." Cole was silent for a moment, considering her words. The thought of relying on something as unpredictable as humanity's nature itself was unsettling. But he knew one thing. If Earth was to survive, they had no other choice but to take risks. "How do we deploy it?" Cole asked, his voice firm. "We need to activate it at the heart of our defense systems," Voss said, the urgency in her voice rising. "The fleet's attack will start with a barrage of long-range missiles. Once we use the device, it will scramble the enemy's targeting systems, making them unable to predict or lock onto our defenses. But we have only one shot at this. If it fails, it won't fail," Cole interrupted, cutting her off. "We'll make it work. How soon can you integrate it?" "Immediately," Voss said, already turning toward the door. "But we'll need to go into the field to activate it manually. If you can keep the fleet distracted long enough, I can get close enough to the command center's main control hub." Cole met her gaze. "No, you're not going alone." Hayes will accompany you. I'm not the one who needs protection, Voss said, her voice sharp. I'm the only one who knows how this works. You're the only one who knows how to activate it. And I'm the one who'll make sure you get to it in one piece. Cole's expression was hard, unwavering. He wasn't giving her a choice. She was a brilliant scientist, but even brilliance didn't guarantee survival in the face of alien firepower. Hayes crossed her arms. What about the rest of the fleet? She asked. How do we keep them distracted long enough for Dr. Voss to get to the hub? That's where we come in, Cole said, glancing at his team. I'll hold them off. We'll use the decoy drones to draw their attention, and when Voss is ready, we'll create a diversion at the command center. We're not letting Earth fall today. Voss's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes flashing with determination. I don't care what it takes, Captain. This is humanity's one chance to show the galaxy what we're made of. We fight together, or we fall apart. Cole met her gaze, his expression hardening. Then let's give them a show. As they turned to prepare for the mission, Cole couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing a dangerous game. Humanity's adaptability might be their greatest strength, but it was also their greatest vulnerability. The aliens might underestimate them, but Cole knew all too well how quickly the tables could turn. The clock was ticking, and soon the battle for Earth would begin in earnest. Chapter 3: Into the Fire. The rumble of incoming fire was unmistakable. The first salvo had already hit the atmosphere, a cascade of high-energy pulses that lanced through the sky like lightning, bright against the deepening twilight. The enemy was here. Captain Cole stood at the center of the command hub, watching the feed from the surface defenses. He could feel the tension creeping into his muscles, but his face remained impassive, a mask forged through years of combat. They had a plan, they had a chance, but chances were fleeting, and time was running out. Status report, he barked to his team. All systems online, Captain. Lieutenant Hayes replied, her voice steady, though her eyes flicked nervously to the readouts. The decoys are active, and the drones are deploying as scheduled. But we got a problem. The fleet's already shifting course. They're adapting to our strategy faster than we anticipated. Then we need to move faster, Cole said, turning to the tactical map. I want all units in position to defend Voss. I'll handle the distraction. Hayes nodded, but her expression was uncertain. Are you sure about this, Captain? If we focus too much on drawing them away from the hub, we don't have a choice. His voice was sharp. Voss gets that device to the core, or it's game over. We either disrupt their targeting systems now, or we all burn. The tension in the room tightened like a noose. Cole could feel the weight of every eye on him, waiting for him to lead them through the storm. He'd been in tight situations before, but this felt different. The stakes weren't just personal, they were planetary. Make it happen, Cole said, slapping the console in front of him. Get ready to move. The doors to the command center opened, and Dr. Elena Voss stepped in, her usually calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the urgency of the moment. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with determination. We've run out of time, Captain, she said. I need to be at the launch hub now, or everything we've planned will be for nothing. Understood, Cole replied. He turned to Hayes. Get her there safely. Hayes hesitated for a brief second, her brow furrowing as she looked at Voss. We're risking everything for a theory, she muttered under her breath, her voice barely audible. Voss stiffened, but before she could respond, Cole cut in. Trust the plan, Lieutenant. You'll get her to the hub. I'll keep the fleet distracted. The sharp sound of an explosion rocked the building, sending a wave of vibrations through the floor. A deafening roar followed, distant but powerful. The attack had begun. Without another word, Cole turned on his heel and strode toward the exit. As he passed Voss, their eyes met for a fleeting moment. She didn't need to say it, but the look was clear. If they failed, they would all be lost. The streets outside the command center were chaos. Military vehicles roared past, kicking up clouds of dust as soldiers scrambled to their positions. Cole was already in the thick of it, climbing into the cockpit of his command fighter, a sleek, gunmetal gray machine built for speed and firepower. The launch pad was buzzing with activity as final checks were performed. Captain Cole, a voice crackled over the intercom. All systems are ready. You're clear for takeoff. Copy that, Cole said, his voice tight. He threw the throttle forward, and the fighter shot into the air, climbing rapidly toward the stratosphere. As the sky opened up before him, he looked down at the world below, humanity's last line of defense. He didn't have time to admire the view. The alien fleet was approaching fast, their massive warships descending from the outer atmosphere. The first wave of fighters already loomed in the distance, their forms stark against the stars. A tremor ran through the ship as the first rounds of alien artillery slammed into the planet's surface. The sky flickered with deadly energy, lighting up the horizon. Cole gripped the controls tighter, his pulse quickening. "Time to dance," he muttered. He engaged the afterburners, the roar of the engines drowning out all other sound. The fighter accelerated, darting through the flak and fire as enemy ships loomed larger in his vision. On his display, he saw the glowing red target locks of enemy ships targeting the Earth's command center. Cole swore under his breath. Not today. He pulled hard on the stick, rolling the fighter into a series of evasive maneuvers. Enemy lasers streaked past, missing by inches. He weaved through a series of exploding drones, narrowly avoiding collisions as he raced toward the alien fleet. The fighter's weapon systems powered up as he locked on to the nearest enemy ship. "Locked. Firing," Cole said, voice steady as he pulled the trigger. A stream of blue-white energy blasted forward, tearing through the hull of the alien ship. It didn't explode in a spectacular fireball, but the ship's systems flickered, its engines sputtering as it struggled to stay aloft. Cole didn't wait to see it fall. He had a bigger target to worry about. His fighter banked hard as the first wave of alien drones began their assault. They were fast, ruthless, and efficient. But Cole was faster. As he evaded another incoming blast, a sudden realization hit him. This wasn't just a battle for Earth anymore. This was humanity's defining moment. Could they adapt, survive, and rise up when all seemed lost? The answer was just ahead. He didn't know how, but Cole was certain of one thing. They would make the aliens regret ever underestimating the human race. Back on the ground, Dr. Voss and Lieutenant Hayes sprinted through the smoky streets, heading toward the launch hub. The world around them was a blur, the sound of distant explosions growing louder as they neared the heart of the conflict. Voss's mind was fixed on the device, her thoughts racing. Would it work? Could they turn the tide of the battle? But as the ground shook beneath their feet, Voss knew one thing for certain. They were playing for keeps. Chapter 4: The Last Stand. The shriek of incoming projectiles tore through the air as Captain Cole's fighter rocketed through the chaos of the battle. The once clear sky had darkened, streaked with the ominous trails of alien ships, their massive silhouettes blotting out the stars. But Cole didn't flinch. He was in his element now, the weight of the world hanging on a thread as he danced between explosions, using every ounce of skill he had honed over years of fighting for humanity's survival. Target locked. Firing. The words were barely out of his mouth before his ship's weapons unleashed another blistering stream of fire. The lead alien craft exploded in a shower of debris, but the victory felt hollow. There were more on the way, far more, and they were getting smarter. "Captain, we got a problem." Lieutenant Hayes' voice crackled in his earpiece, her tone laced with urgency. "They're shifting tactics. We've lost contact with half of our ground units. They're going after Voss." His stomach dropped. "Get her to the launch hub now." "I'm on it," Hayes replied without hesitation, the sound of engines roaring in the background. Cole could hear the sound of gunfire and explosions on her end, the chaotic backdrop to their desperate mission. But Cole's mind was already racing. Dr. Elena Voss was the key to everything. Her device could be their last hope. If they lost her, they lost the war. Humanity's war. And the enemy knew it. The ground shook again, this time more violently than before. Dr. Voss stumbled as she ran, the crackling noise of battle filling the air, growing closer with every step. The city's defenses were collapsing, but the launch hub, her only chance, was just ahead. They had to make it. "Move faster," Lieutenant Hayes shouted, shoving Voss ahead. The two of them were running through the narrow streets, dodging blasts that sent shards of glass and debris scattering in every direction. Almost there, Voss panted, her heart racing in her chest. The device she was carrying, a last-ditch effort to stop the alien forces, was strapped tightly to her back, and with each step, the weight felt more like a burden than a hope. "Don't stop," Hayes urged, eyes scanning the horizon. "We're almost—" Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a flash of light illuminated the area. The launch hub was within view, but it was under fire. Alien troops were already descending, their monstrous forms cloaked in dark armor, their weapons gleaming with deadly energy. Hayes spun around, drawing her sidearm. "We've got company," she muttered, but there was no panic in her voice, only a steely determination. "Get me to the control room," Voss commanded, her voice sharp despite the chaos around them. Hayes nodded, adjusting her grip on the gun. They ran for cover, moving quickly but cautiously, knowing they didn't have much time. The alien soldiers were already regrouping, and their assault was relentless. A barrage of energy blasts lit up the streets around them, narrowly missing their positions. "We need to get inside now," Hayes said, her voice barely a whisper. Voss nodded grimly, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The device, everything hinged on that device. If it worked, they could disrupt the enemy's command structure, but there were no guarantees. If it didn't, humanity's last stand would be over, and they would be lost. Back in the sky, Cole was weaving through the remnants of the alien fleet, his fighter a blur of motion as it sliced through the chaos. He could feel the pressure mounting, his crew, the soldiers on the ground, the people watching from home, all counting on him to hold the line. But the enemy wasn't going to let them off easy. Their ships were adapting, learning from their every move. New orders coming in, his comms officer interrupted, a voice frantic. "We've got no more reinforcements." "You're on your own, Captain." Cole's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. There was no time for words now, just action. His fingers danced across the controls, firing missiles, blasting through enemy lines, doing everything he could to buy Voss the time she needed. As he pushed deeper into the alien formation, a sudden, horrifying realization hit him. The enemy strategy was clear. They were herding them toward one location, forcing them into a corner. There was no escape, no retreat. If they didn't take control now, the planet would fall. "Voss, do you have the device online yet?" Cole asked, his voice sharp through the comms. "Almost," Voss replied, breathless. "We're inside the hub, but they've breached the outer defenses. We need a distraction now." "I'm giving you one," Cole said, his voice cold. "Hold on." He punched the throttle, accelerating straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. Missiles streaked past him as he made a final, desperate move. He engaged every weapon at his disposal, a blazing flare of destruction that ripped through the enemy's defenses. Explosions erupted in all directions, but the aliens weren't backing down. In fact, their counterattack was already underway. Voss barely had time to react as the room around her shuddered, walls groaning under the pressure of the bombardment. Hayes was already firing at the advancing alien soldiers, but they were closing in fast. "This is it," Hayes said, her voice filled with urgency. "Do it, Voss." Voss didn't hesitate. She stepped forward to the console and slammed her hand down. The device hummed to life, the air around them crackling with energy. For a brief moment, everything felt frozen, and then the world erupted. A pulse of energy, bright as the sun, exploded from the device. The entire building trembled, and the alien forces staggered, their systems failing one by one. "We've got it!" Voss shouted, her voice triumphant. But before she could take another breath, the ground beneath them cracked open, a tremor stronger than before. The fight was far from over. The battle was still raging, and the war for humanity's future had only just begun.